Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this really cute charm square bag. It's got short handles and a really great button loop. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. So in my leftover charm stash I found these lovely squares from I think the designer's Lily Ashbury. They're really bright and colourful, and I think I'm going to make a little bag for the summer. So I've got 20 of these, and I think I'm only going to need 12, 6 on each side of the bag. So I'm going to choose which 6 I'm going to use. So I've chosen 2 sets of 6. So in the first set I have these, and in the second set I have these fabrics. So now I'm going to take them to the sewing machine and sew them all together into a front and a back. So I've sewn these into a front and a back, and then I thought, right, I need a base. So I looked in my stash and I have a jelly roll, a partially used jelly roll with basically colours of the rainbow, and I've chosen this jelly roll strip to go on the base. So I'm going to sew that onto the bottom of, so what I'll do is I'll turn this one round, so, and I'm going to sew that in between, like that, for the base. So I've sewn the base of the bag in place now, and I've chosen quite a dark colour just because when you set your bag down it's going to get maybe a little bit dirty, so I wanted a dark colour on the base for that reason. I'm now going to have a look in my stash of wadding pieces and find some wadding so that I can do some quilting across the bag. So I found this piece of wadding in my stash which was big enough for the bag. I have pinned the wadding to the front of the bag, but unlike a quilt there's no backing to the wadding, so it's just plain wadding on the back. This is because as part of the bag construction I'm going to put a lining into the bag, and I don't want to be quilting that at the moment. So now I'm going to go and do some quilting at the machine. So I've done the quilting, you can see there's quite a lot of quilting there. And so I've done that all over, this kind of cross hatching of quilting. You can do any sort of quilting you want, you could free motion all across it if you want, but for me I really like this kind of straight quilting. Maybe I'm a little bit OCD, not sure, but that's what I like. So I am now going to trim the wadding down to the size of the bag. So in my stash I found this fabric. It's not the perfect match, but I think it's going to work just fine as a lining fabric. This is a fat quarter, and I'm going to use the quilted piece, the bag piece, as my template to cut out the fabric I'm going to need for the lining. So I've got my bag piece placed on top of the lining fabric, and now I'm going to cut that lining fabric to the same size as the bag piece. So I've got 2 pieces here. I've got my bag piece and my lining piece, and what we're going to do is we're going to take, just put that to one side, we're going to take the bag piece, we're going to fold it in half, and we're going to sew down each side, here, down this side, and down this side, and then I'm going to take this lining fabric, I'm going to fold that in half, and again I'm going to sew down the sides. And you probably want to put a little back stitch at both ends of your stitching so that it doesn't start to fall apart. So I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine and do that now. So I've sewn a 1/4 inch seam down all of the sides, but what I want to do is finish the sides off. I don't have an overlocker, so I'm just going to do a zigzag stitch down all the seams just to finish them off so that there's no fraying. So you need to make the gusset on the bag to make the bag sit upright. So to do this we have to turn in, we have to make a little triangle here. So this is the side seam, and I've run that along, I've folded that up so we've got 1 inch here, and then the base of the bag is now 2 inches wide. That 2.5 inch jelly roll strip is now 2.5 inches wide. So I've placed the pins so that that's going to be my stitching line, and I want to make sure that it basically is the 2 inches. So when I look inside the bag, I don't know if I can do this one-handed. Let's have a look. When I go inside the bag, when it's all turned through, the base of the bag is going to be that jelly roll strip that we placed in between the front and the back of the bag. So I've measured it, I'm going to sew it, and I'll show you what it looks like. So I've sewn across there, that's the stitching there, and I'm going to turn it through and show you what that looks like. So I've turned that through, the stitching's gone a little bit wider than the 2.5 inch strip, but I'm happy with that because what I don't want to see is that 2.5 inch strip on the front and back of the bag. I want that to be on the bottom of the bag, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to repeat those measurements on the other side of the bag now. So I've repeated it on both sides, so you can see the base of the bag there. I'll try standing it up. When you stand it up, you can't see the base of the bag, which is what I really wanted. So I'm now going to repeat those measurements on the lining and put a gusset into the lining as well. So before I cut that excess fabric off at the corners, I want to check that it's a snug fit. So I've turned my bag piece inside out, and I've got the lining piece right side out, and I'm going to put the bag inside the lining piece and turn it through and check that it's a nice snug fit. So I've turned it all through. The first time I did it, it wasn't as snug a fit as I wanted, so I went back to the sewing machine and made the lining a little bit smaller at the corners. So now I'm quite happy that that's a nice snug fit. So I'm going to dismantle the bag again, and I'm going to cut off those corners just to reduce the bulk and do a little bit more zigzagging stitch to reduce the fraying. So there we go, the gussets are now finished, the triangles have been cut off, and I've just done some zigzag edging on the seams there. So the next thing is to make the handles and to make the clasp for the button. So for the button loop, I've used the same fabric that I used for the base of the bag. So that's a 2.5 inch strip, and I've cut it to 12 inches. Then along the length, I folded it in half and pressed it. Then I've brought the two sides into the middle, pressed those, and then pressed it one more time with all the edges in the middle. I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and do some top stitching down both sides to secure it. So I've sewn down both sides of the button loop, and you can see I've already found the centre point. So I'm going to find that centre point, and what we need to do is bring one piece down like this, and then you're going to bring the other piece down like this. There we go. And you can take that over and press it in place to keep it nicely crisp. And then at the other end, what you're going to do is just lift this and push it over about 1/8 of an inch, and we're just going to sew along here just to secure that. That will be hidden in the final stitching of the bag. So I'll take that over to the sewing machine. Now with your button loops, what you need to do is stitch along here and along here. So down the edges of the triangle is where you need to do a top stitch now, just to secure that point in place. So I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine now and do that, and I might need to put a little back stitch in as well to secure it. So I have gone down a stitch down each side of the triangle. I didn't actually back stitch because it's such a short piece that I thought the back stitching would look a little bit ugly really. So I've just left the threads very long, and I basically popped the knot like I would if I were quilting. So that has secured the ends, and it looks rather neat. And what I've also done is I have covered a button in fabric from the same collection, and I've sewn that in place on the bag. So now what we need to do is, with this, we need to find out how big the buttonhole needs to be. So we're going to work out how big that is, and then we're going to sew along here so that the button stays in place and the closure works. Okay, so I've sewn the buttonhole closure in place, so now the button's not going to come loose, and then we've got to secure the whole bag together. So I've pressed this strip, first of all half lengthways, and then about 1/4 of an inch in from the sides towards that centre point. So what I found is easier is if you take your piece of wadding and you line it up against one of those corner folds, and then you bring this other fold in and take it over, and then I'm going to clip those in place. So let me do that and I'll show you them all clipped in place. So I've now used the Wonder Clips. I've clipped everything in place, you can see there, and I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine now and do a couple of rows of stitching down just to secure everything. So I'm now ready to construct the bag. I have clipped in place the straps. I've got one on this side, and then I've matched them on the other side, and these straps are long enough to be a handbag, but if you want them to be a shoulder bag, you just need to make your straps a little bit longer than that. And then I've also clipped on the button loop onto the reverse of the bag in the position I want it. So they're all ready, and now I'm going to slip this bag into the lining. So I've now slipped the bag inside the lining, and I've made sure that the handles and the buttonhole loop are also inside the bag, and I've clipped them in place. So where I had clipped the handles, I've transferred those clips to include the lining, and I've gone all the way around the bag, clipping it in place. Now you can either have your opening where you turn your bag through on the top seam, or you can have your opening on the side seam. So I prefer mine on the side seam because it makes the top look a lot cleaner. So I went back and I unpicked part of the side seam and reinforced it with some top stitching. But if you don't want to do that, you can leave a gap along the top here where you're going to stitch now, and that's where you'll turn the bag through. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine now and I'm going to sew with, it's going to be a wider, I'm not going to do it with 1/4 of an inch, I want it a bit wider than that, but I don't know if I want it a full 1/2 inch, so I might go somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around when I sew it up. So I've gone all round the top with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and every time I got to a handle or the button loop I did some back stitching just to reinforce it. So now I'm going to turn the bag through. Now if you unstitch the side seam like I did to pull the bag through, you want to give it a press and then stitch it back up just with a top stitch over the opening. So I'm going to do that now. So I've sewn up the side and I've tidied and cut away all the loose threads, and I've turned it the right way around, so it's looking good. Now the final thing we need to do is top stitch along the opening of the bag along here, and we want to make sure that that lining doesn't pop out to say hello. We just want to see the front of the bag. So I'm going to take this over to the ironing board. I'm going to press it so that the lining is inside the bag. Where necessary, I might clip it in place, and then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and do the final top stitch. So the bag is complete and it's looking pretty good. So this is my summer bag. I'm going to be able to fit my phone in it, my Kindle, my iPad, my sun cream, my sunglasses, a little bit of money. I'm all set to go. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and keep quilting!